Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jodi Goldstein.
I feel like such a slacker after hearing what Kayla is doing and already has done. Wow, incredibly impressive, Kayla. Can't wait to see what you become. So thank you so much, Dean Sharma, for that kind introduction, and to everyone at Grossman for inviting me here today. It's always so great to be back at UVM, and it's such an honor to be here in this capacity. And as I lay awake this morning, very early, looking out onto Mount Mansfield, watching the sunrise, besides thinking I wish I was asleep still, I was thinking about how grateful I was. And it doesn't happen often that you have that time to reflect, but thinking about how grateful I was to grow up in Vermont and attend UVM, and now return as often as I do to create so many amazing memories with my family and friends in Stowe. Whew, getting choked up. And as I drove to Burlington today, I was first grateful my kids let me play my favorite Bon Jovi songs to get me excited instead of their rap music. And as I turned onto Main Street, so many very distant memories came back to me, most of which probably would not be appropriate to talk about in this venue. But suffice it to say, we were the last class at UVM to still have an 18-year-old drinking age. Fish was just getting its start, playing regularly at Nectar's and parties all around town, no cover charge. Drafts were just 25 cents at the last chance, I think is gone now, I don't know. And the lines were really long at What Ails You, which I think still exists. And interesting, I was just saying, as I was walking up here, I think the last time I was at the Flynn Theater was to see an unknown comedian named Jerry Seinfeld, who was standing up here where I am today, although I was told most of you wouldn't have heard of him either. So, I'm not great with jokes, as my family can attest, so I think it's best if I just get on with the commencement speech. So first, let me begin by congratulating all of today's graduates. What an exciting day, one you have so earned, and also one your families have earned. And as Dean Sharma said, I know from personal experience, first as a student here, but now as a mom of 3 boys, one of whom is graduating from high school in a couple of weeks. So congratulations to all of you. So I have to admit, when I told my kids that I was asked to speak here today, their first reaction was, "You? Why did they ask you?" And then I started asking myself the same question, why did they ask me? And I began to think about my personal journey and experiences at companies big and small, venture capital, at early stage startups, and now at the Harvard Innovation Labs. And as I thought about my career and life after UVM, about its twists and turns, and about your journey ahead, a somewhat strange concept kept coming into my mind, so bear with me here, trying this out. Aren't we all just going to be replaced by robots? Okay, so maybe that's not what you were expecting. But in the business world, it is something that's thought about quite a lot. And certainly there's no shortage of evidence that automation and technology have already had a profound impact on our society. And in the 1920s, the average lifespan of a company in the S&P 500 was 67 years. Today, 15. So that means that most of the companies that are around today will be gone before you all hit 40. And lest you think I'm being alarmist, just last week, I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal, had to rewrite my speech, because it reported that not only are robots destroying our jobs, but they're not even doing it fast enough. It went on to say that countless job sectors, from healthcare to personal services, are resistant to automation, that they're holding back the entire country's standard of living. Not only that, if you listen to certain scientists and even entrepreneurs, prominent ones like Elon Musk, you'll discover that there are quite a few credible people who actually believe that we may already have been replaced by robots. But that's a different speech. So, On this glorious spring day in beautiful Burlington, Vermont, as you consider the lives that you have ahead of you, why, you may ask, is this person telling us that we may have been replaced by robots? Rest assured, I'm not back at UVM to warn you of some bleak dystopian future. And when we look past the companies that we could never imagine being without, we should also consider all the new companies and industries we never could have imagined at all, even just a few years ago. Many of the world's most valuable companies are much younger than you are. For instance, today we have no hesitation riding in a stranger's car, sleeping in a stranger's home. In fact, I'm sure some of the families are doing that tonight. And these companies that didn't exist a few years ago are now multi-billion-dollar businesses. So what all this tells us is that while we can't predict the future or what jobs will be in the future, what we can predict is that things will continue to change, that innovation will continue to become increasingly important, and that as a result, people like you will have more opportunity than ever before in history to use your talent and your creativity to be part of those innovations. So whether or not you believe we're going to be replaced by robots, what I do want to do today is discuss something much more personal and relevant to all of you. I want to discuss how opportunities open up to us when we embrace creativity and innovation. Not simply professional opportunities, but opportunities throughout our lives. In my experience, it's only when we push ourselves outside of our comfort zones, learn to trust our instincts, that we discover what we're truly passionate about and who we want to be. We begin this journey of discovery not simply toward becoming rich, famous, or successful, not just discovering a better you, but to discover your best you, your best self. So, how can you avoid the inevitable robot apocalypse? I'm going to give you 4 ways. First, put yourself in situations where you just might fail. I know we tend to romanticize failure these days as if it were a choice. And let's be honest, most of you aren't here today because you failed. You're here today because you succeeded over and over again. And nobody wants to fail. It's frustrating, it's painful, and I'm not suggesting you purposely try to fail or fail for the sake of failing. But you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. Believe me, I know from experience. And as the Dean told you, I now run the Harvard Innovation Labs, where we support and resource students who are interested in innovation and entrepreneurship. At the iLab, we facilitate opportunities for experimentation, where we try to help students test their ideas and often fail along the way. One of our iLab entrepreneurs actually compared this process to the guess and test approach to math in elementary school. When you don't know the answer, you simply plug in a number, see if it works. You almost never get it right the first time, but as you make increasingly educated guesses about what might work, you eventually do find the right answer. And it's the same with the choices you make in your life. To be perfectly honest, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do when I graduated. I chose my first job after UVM, not because it was with a big, prestigious multinational with a famous CEO, but because I get to travel, experience what was essentially a new job every 3 months. I was going to learn a lot in a short period of time, and I was incredibly impatient, so it seemed like a pretty exciting choice to make. But it wasn't long before I realized I hated wearing suits, wasn't cut out for the corporate world. I distinctly remember one superior telling me, it's amazing how it sticks with you 20 years later, "Jodi, you're just being too honest." I think most people would hear that as a marching order to tone it down, but I heard something else, that GE just wasn't right for me. Interestingly enough, I realized I grew up in Vermont because my dad had that similar epiphany 20 years prior to that. He threw away his suits, he burned his ties, literally had a tie burning party, and moved his family to Vermont. And so I got to grow up in Vermont for that reason. Anyway, was my experience there a failure? Maybe, but it helped me to realize that I just wasn't cut out for corporate life, and it prompted me to pursue something very different, where I learned a little more about what I liked and also what I didn't like, which eventually helped me realize I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And in my 15 years in startups, I learned a lot about failure. Some were successful, some even made money, but a lot of them failed. One of these startups I'm going to tell you about was called Send.com. You're all too young to remember. I'm not sure you were born yet, Our value proposition was sending gifts through this thing called the internet. I know it hardly seems innovative today, but 20 years ago, trust me, it really was an innovative idea. And believe me when I say we were poised to be an enormous success. We attracted the best investors. We had raised close to $100 million. We were planning an IPO. And then the internet bubble burst. And just like that, we were one of the many casualties. And it's gut-wrenching when something like that happens. We poured ourselves, our heart and souls into this company. And then poof, it was gone. And eventually I realized so many things about failure. We had made some pretty big mistakes that had nothing to do with the bubble bursting. A lot of the decisions we were making were not based on sound business advice, but on trying to keep our investors happy. And much of that $100 million was spent on ridiculous Super Bowl ads. As time passed, however, I realized that this failure wasn't really that bad in the whole scheme of things. Far more important was what I discovered along the way, and that I didn't make those same mistakes twice, especially the Super Bowl one. The point is, the choices you make won't all work out. In fact, you shouldn't want them to, because it's when they don't work out that we get the information and insights that we need to discover what we really want to do. Of course, not everyone's comfortable with failure at the outset. I think it's something that you have to learn. That's why I believe every day we should all try to do something that pushes us outside of our comfort zones. It doesn't have to be big, just something that feels uncomfortable. Maybe it's walking into a networking event where you don't know anyone. I think beer helps, Kayla told us. Maybe it's making a controversial point to a superior in a meeting. Or maybe it's giving a commencement speech at your alma mater. At some point, you'll learn that the worst case scenario really isn't that bad. You'll learn that through failure, through the exploration of different ideas, that we discover what we're good at and ultimately our true passions. Or as one of our entrepreneurs put it, you have to figure out what's wrong before you can figure out what's right. And in order to do that, you have to take some risks. And while I'm naturally pretty adventurous, not everyone's a born risk taker. And that brings me to the second piece of advice. Trust your intuition in situations defined by the only thing scarier than failure, ambiguity. Here's why. At least when we fail, we know we failed. We dust ourselves off, we try it again, and move on to something else. But entrepreneurship isn't black and white, and neither is life. More often, things tend to be gray. In business, you can seem to do everything right. You can start with a great idea, put a great business plan together, listen to the market, get close to the customer, and then things change. Maybe the market changes, technology changes, and the question becomes, can you adjust your focus and recognize a new opportunity? In life, we all like to believe that we're nimble and perceptive enough to navigate ambiguity, but sometimes we panic. Sometimes our own egos or blinders make us unwilling to see what's right in front of us. And we gravitate to people who validate those assumptions. But if we learn to recognize that life as in business isn't about getting from point A to point B, but instead is about recognizing opportunities along the way, we're more likely to trust our intuition. And in my experience, intuition is where a lot of our best decisions lie. When you listen to your intuition, it becomes much easier to pivot, to say, stop, this just isn't working, or maybe we're thinking about this the wrong way. You begin making decisions based on not what others are telling you or what some master plan said you should do, but on your instincts. For instance, it was only when a tech startup initially focused on location sharing realized that users were actually sharing photos, not locations, that Instagram became Instagram. Or when another company realized its product failed as a cure for headaches, but was a pretty good soft drink, that it became Coca-Cola. I have to admit, when I was offered the job at the iLab, so many people told me not to take it. They assured me it was going to fail. After all, they said, what does Harvard know about innovation? But something inside me told me that this could be something truly transformational and important. I had a sense that even a traditional institution like Harvard could do something as bold and unconventional as the iLab. So 6 years later, I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I'm also proud that I trusted my intuition. And I'm actually thinking that a lot of you might feel the same way today. How many of you based your decision to go to UVM on your instincts? Think about it. You probably stepped foot on campus and had a feeling. You weren't analyzing data. There was something about UVM that resonated with you. You connected with it. You were basing your decision on what felt right to you. And aren't you glad you did? In life as in business, the sooner you get comfortable with the idea that there are no straight lines, no roadmap, the more likely you are to follow your heart and open yourself up to new opportunities that you might have missed along the way. When you learn to trust your intuition, you are more motivated to explore, more prepared to choose courage over fear, and more likely to do what is meaningful to you. The same is true with lesson number 3, humility. Being humble enough to surround yourself with people who are different than you, and often smarter than you. It's hard to overstate the value of diverse viewpoints to innovation, but our default behavior is always quite different. We tend to surround ourselves with people who are like us, because it's easier, because it's comfortable. But if you want to learn, you have to seek out people who are different than you. I see it every day at the iLab. It really does work. But I must admit, that was a challenge for me growing up in a tiny ski town in Vermont with only 1,200 people, no traffic light, and the closest McDonald's a half hour away. It was only when I went away to school that I found people who had perspectives that were different from my own, and it opened up my world in so many ways. But it's not enough to surround yourself with people who are different than you. You also need to find people who know things that you don't. And that also wasn't a problem at UVM. I'm certainly dating myself when I say that my class was the first to have computers in our dorm rooms. It took me weeks to learn to turn it on, by the way. But I mention it because we were required to take a course called CS11. It was known as a weed-out course for the business school students. I certainly wouldn't have passed without the help of my engineering friends down the hall from me in Harris Millis. So thank you again. Being around people who are different and have different skill sets helps us learn and become better. And it also teaches us humility. We all know confidence is important in life and in business, but in my experience, the #1 trait of all successful entrepreneurs and leaders isn't confidence, it's self-awareness. It's knowing when you don't know something. While confidence is important, humility can open up many more opportunities. Whether it's with a business partner who has a completely different perspective or background than you, or even a spouse. I'm not ashamed to admit that my husband and I met fighting over a parking space. He doesn't know I'm saying this right now. But 20 years later, we're still challenging each other. We still disagree about who won the fight, though. The good news is the world is a much smaller place today than it was when I grew up in rural Vermont. It's easier than ever to actively seek out people with different perspectives. So starting tomorrow, you should, because discoveries, whether scientific or personal, are far more likely to happen when you have people around you with different perspectives and ideas, maybe even better than your own. So my final point is this. Remember that your passion is what will ultimately fuel your ability to make an impact. And by impact, I don't necessarily mean curing cancer or solving poverty, although it would be great if you did. I mean finding something fulfilling that propels you forward. Not long ago, the iLab incubated a venture started by a student who was previously in a coveted job at one of the biggest tech companies in the world. In a lot of ways, it was everything he ever hoped for. But to his surprise, he was completely unhappy and uninspired. So he quit his job, went out into the woods, Vermont I think about what was important to him. And there he decided to found a company that helps people disconnect in tiny houses in the woods. It's amazing how you come up with your best ideas. Here's the thing, he found that once he began doing something that was personally meaningful to him, all of a sudden he had unlimited energy and passion. And that came through in his work, to his investors, and to his team. And I've learned over time that when we follow our passions, there's always a better chance of success, which in turn means that what we are doing is more ultimately likely to have an impact. So together, passion and impact create a virtuous cycle. So the next time someone tells you that you have to suffer through a job you don't like before you can earn the right to do something you'll enjoy, and believe me, they will, tell them life's too short. At a time when work and life are so intertwined, you might as well do something that gives you meaning. You might not discover what it is immediately. At that first job out of school, you might find you like some things about it more than others, as I did. Or maybe you'll be like me, choosing a path out of business school that was unconventional, but one that led me to the early stage businesses that I love. And after a while, you might learn that working 18-hour days for companies that may not exist in 10 years has less meaning to you than you thought. But that's okay too, because that'll lead you on to the next thing and the next, which in my case led me on this winding path from corporate America to venture capital to startups, and now to working with student innovators, the ultimate early stage businesses. So it may seem counterintuitive or even self-centered on its face, but the most important person impacted by what you do will always be you, because your passion is what will ultimately fuel everything else, from the kind of person you want to be to the kind of impact you want to have. So listen, I don't believe that we're all going to be replaced by robots, or that innovation will solve everything. Although, whoever figures out how to replace what's happening right now in the White House with robots, now that would be a business to invest in. I knew I'd get a positive response in Vermont. But what we do know is that technology and the pace of change is not slowing down, and that increasingly, the things that will differentiate our businesses and us as individuals is our creativity and our ability to innovate, to evolve, to change, to stay relevant, by approaching life not in the binary terms it's so often framed, but in ways that remind us that we're always learning, getting better at it every day, on our own journey toward discovering not simply a better version of ourselves, but our best selves. To me, that is a life worth living. I wish you the best in finding yours. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and congratulations.